Okay, good afternoon. It is now 1300 Eastern Time, and thank you all for joining today's panel, brought to you by the Navy Reserve Mentoring Network. We have an energized group of NOSCEOs, both current and former, for you today. They've volunteered their time to make this event possible. A special thanks to the director of the Navy Reserve Mentoring Network, that's Captain Brion, who made this event possible, and our strategic communication team lead, Captain Bush. I would also like to thank my own region commander, Captain Welch, and the CSO, Commander Rose, for their continued support that has made my own NOSC command tour exceptionally enjoyable. You see, as a first-time NOSCEO, I did not quite understand all the aspects of running an Echelon 5 command in the environment where you only see the majority of the assigned personnel 1 week in a month. At larger NOSC, perhaps not at all. So as your panel moderator today, I'll guide the discussion. We have a short period of time, it's only an hour, so we're going to break this discussion into two distinct parts. First, I have a few questions for our panelists, which each panelist will answer in turn. And the rest will come from you, the audience, in an open Q&A. Okay, so this meeting is being recorded. The Navy Reserve Mentoring Network homepage, or the portal, is up on the slide at the very top. So if you want to share this recording with any people that you work with, feel free to provide them with that link that's at the top of this slide. I'll also show it again at the end, and they'll have the recording for their personal viewing. Okay. So just to cover a couple of rules as we go forward, please engage the panel. The panelists, they're volunteers. They've dedicated time out of their busy schedules to be with us today. So please, those of you that are potential PCOs, or you're thinking about converting over to FTS and pursuing this career path, please engage with them. This is your opportunity. Please remain on mute until you're called upon by myself. So I will moderate the questions. The way that we're going to conduct that towards the end is you'll raise your hand using the Microsoft Teams hand raise gesture that should be located in the window of this meeting. There are a few emojis, and one of them is to raise your hand, and I will call on you to ask your question. If you're on the phone line, I will open the questions for phone participants following all of the questions that have been asked by personnel inside of the actual MS Teams meeting. And then finally, please save your questions until the Q&A portion of the event. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our panel. Captain Esther Bopp, 1207, NOSC, Washington, D.C., CO. Over to you, ma'am.
Awesome. Thank you, sir. And once again, I want to thank everyone for tuning in this afternoon. My name is Captain Esther Bopp. I am the commanding officer of NOSC, Washington, D.C. I hail from Jacksonville, Florida. I've been in the Navy, commissioned in the Navy since 1994. I was a cell res for about 3.5 years. I deployed to Afghanistan. I'm a former Marine, 5 years, 10 months, and 11 days. This is my second command tour, but my first command tour was at a Navy recruiting district, and that was in Ohio. Now, this is my first NOSC command, and this is my first opportunity as a NOSCEO. Here at NOSC Washington, this is known as a Super NOSC. There are a few 06 NOSC, but this is not only the Super NOSC, but it is the nation's largest NOSC as well. And back over to you, Commander Jessup.
Thank you, ma'am, for the introduction, and welcome. Commander Kerry Chase. Over, ma'am. And Carrie, if you're speaking right now, perhaps you're on mute. I did mute everyone at the beginning of this panel, so please take yourself off mute if you're muted.
There
Over.
we go. How's that?
Loud and clear.
Loud and clear. Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you, Captain. Received my undergraduate from Old Dominion University. Then I went to Officer Candidate School in Pensacola, Florida. That was my commissioning source. Was commissioned as a surface warfare officer. Did both of my sea tours out of Pearl Harbor. At the time was Dual Mill. Then took my shore tours at the United States Naval Academy, which was where I laterally transferred to the human resources community. Did a canvasser recruiter tour, and then lateral transferred to the 1207 HR FTS community. So I'm currently a 1207. Had a tour at Res 4, followed by command of NOSC Whidbey Island, best tour of my career. And now I'm currently the head of manpower policy at the Office of Chief of Navy Reserve. Have a husband and 2 kids, and I'm back here on the East Coast. I think that's it for me. Let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you, Carrie. Appreciate it, and welcome to the panel. And Commander Jamise Jam Jam Seals, over.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Commander Jamise Seals. Everybody calls me Jam Jam. That's my call sign. As you can figure, I'm an aviator of the helicopter variety. So Naval Academy grad, flight school. Then I did my first tour at HSC 25 out in Guam. I came back as an instructor at HT8 in Pensacola. I picked up FTS there. I did my department head tour down there as well at HT 28. Then I went out to NPS, got my master's, and for my payback tour, I went to the Pentagon. So I served under OPNAV N9I. I worked a lot of POM issues, and then after that, I came to the NOSC. So it's my first NOSC, first command tour. Looking forward to chatting with everyone.
Thank you, Jam Jam. Appreciate it. Welcome. And last but not least, Commander Joe Patterson, over.
Hey, Commander Jessup, thank you so much for letting me be a part of this. Please let me know if I'm coming through choppy. Having a little technical difficulty here. But I'm a submarine FTS. I joined the Navy while I was in college through the Nuclear Officer Propulsion Candidate Program. I think I served with the husband of someone on this panel here on my first tour out there, but I joined the Navy to get out of Hawaii. And then I went to OCS and got stationed as a JO on the USS Cheyenne, fast tack out of Pearl Harbor, and then did some staff tours, War College, and then got reassigned for a department head tour back in Hawaii, and then went to Tactical Training Group Atlantic. So that was joined in 1999. And then in 2012, that was the first time that I worked on a staff that had a Navy Reserve Augmentation Unit assigned. So we did the fleet synthetic training events, certification, other courses, and we had an augment unit that assisted with assessment, mentorship, training. That was pretty neat. Transitioned to FTS in that tour, received a lot of advice on what to do when I went to go be a NOSC CO. Got assigned as CO NOSC Milwaukee, no reserve management experience, very seasoned CO up there, helped prepare me for the job. Great staff, went and did that job. In that job, Chattanooga was attacked, and Milwaukee was an off installation NOSC. So we had to uparm NOSC Milwaukee. And that attack also occurred a couple weeks prior to our statewide centennial event. So the 100-year birthday of the Navy Reserve, we were celebrating in a combination of Madison, Milwaukee, and Green Bay. And so we had to do all this extra mitigation effort, and it was pretty amazing for somebody who had always been in a fleet concentration area supported by the Navy to be the face of the Navy in Milwaukee and to receive all of this non-Navy support. There was a lot of goodwill towards the Navy to make that happen. Pretty cemented in my head what it meant for so many places to be the Navy in that town. So went from that job to be the OSO at ComSub PAC back in Hawaii. So my family and I, we've done 7 moves across the Pacific. So that was a force OSO job, worked with several other OSOs, about 25 reserve units, flown forces to the active command needs. We've facilitated the flow forces for the rescue effort in ARA San Juan down in Argentina. So that was pretty amazing to be a part of. unfortunate outcome, but it definitely showed folks what we can do to come by someone and come by another country in need. Got to work as the deputy N1 there and see the billet funding and some of the strategy and policy side. And can't get into too much detail, but worldwide submarine response. So when there's real world events, there's Navy reserves that do wonderful work in the command and control of our operational and tactical forces, and we would get them for wherever their home is, out to the watch floors in the Middle East, in the Far East, and that was incredibly helpful to those staffs that are performing wartime level activity during a peacetime manning environment. Came from that job to here, Albuquerque. This is an on-installation NOSC, took command in 2019. The NOSC is in an Army building on an Air Force base, so that creates some interesting dynamics, and got here 2 months before the pandemic shut down in-person drilling. So we had 2 face-to-face drill weekends, been virtual since, and thanks for letting me be a part of this. That's it.
Hey, Joe, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thanks for the invite, the intro, and welcome. So I'll switch over screens here. I've stopped sharing my screen, but this meeting is still being recorded. As you can see, we have a various group of panelists from various designators and backgrounds, and I hope you enjoyed today's event. So I'm going to kick this off with asking a few prepared questions for each panelist to answer. We'll go through several rounds of this before we actually open the Q&A. So I'll ask the question, and the panelists will answer the question in the order that they introduce themselves, and I'll call on them prior to. Okay, so beginning with Captain Bob. Ma'am, good afternoon again, and what did you enjoy the most about your command tour?
Okay, so thank you, sir. What did I enjoy the most about my command tour? It's kind of weird because I can only talk about the tour from NRD because I'm not completed yet with this command tour. So I will tell you what I enjoy the most, and the most that I enjoy is the sailors. I enjoy the sailors. I enjoy working with the sailors for the mission of the Navy Reserve. I think it's the expectation that you put on your organization and to see that they can be successful with things that are familiar and requirements that are not, meeting those goals, and that morale and the training that comes with it as well is what I enjoy most about command. Command is actually trying to see exactly how effective you can, not how effective you can make people, but how effective people can be when given just the minute of a task of what needs to be accomplished during your day. So that is actually what I enjoy about the command. The whole caboodle of working with people, communicating with others, communicating with our CELRES partners, working toward our mission, keeping morale high, and letting our sailors know that we absolutely care about them.
Thank you, ma'am. Commander Chase, what did you enjoy the most about your command tour?
So I want to try not to duplicate the answer because it really is always the sailors. They're capable of more than you could ever. Realizing that the buck really stops with you in command, that you're there to make decisions, and then let your boss know what decision you made and why. That there wasn't any asking anymore, really. There was informing and just thinking that maybe everything you've done in your careers is leading up to that moment and feeling prepared for it. So I enjoyed that autonomy, and then discovering the expertise that comes from within the lifelines. There was never an answer that we couldn't get to from within the walls of NOSC Whidbey Island. There's more knowledge and experience with your sailors and your civilian sailors than you could ever imagine. And I remember thinking, well, I know who to call it res for, or I know who to call it such and such. And my first instinct was that I would, need to go outside the lifelines for answers. Turned out that was almost never the case. So discovering the capability and the talent amongst the sailors and the staff was phenomenally rewarding. Experiencing that autonomy and then interacting with the aviation community, those were some of my biggest joys of command.
Thank you, Carrie. And Commander Seals, the same question to you. What did you enjoy the most about your command tour? Over.
Thank you for the question. So I'm only about 7 months in. So I'm just, I took over during COVID in the era of virtual drills. So I'm just starting to get out and meet people and see the world around. So I think there's going to be some opportunities for that with that. I would say right now, not to duplicate the answer before me, but my staff is a multifaceted group of individuals. I've had one-on-ones with all of them, and it's impressive to see what they're striving for, not only in terms of supporting the SARES and our population, but in their own personal growth. I have, a handful of budding entrepreneurs. I have a handful of leaders who would like to become officers. So watching them work together in that sort of unit cohesion, and also to support each other in their personal goals has been the most rewarding thing for me. I would also say that I purposely chose a large NOS so I would have the benefit of a triad. At a smaller NOS, you may be the only khaki wearer, you may be the only officer, but getting to use the triad and sitting down in the office and figuring out, okay, guys, let's talk about how we're going to solve this one. That's been a truly rewarding problem-solving experience for me.
Thank you, Jam. And next up, Commander Patterson. What did you enjoy the most about your command tour, or still enjoying? Over.
Yeah. Thanks, Commander Jessup. Same answer. It really is humbling to be a group of folks. You learn a lot about yourself through the types of feedback you get from all the people you work with. But getting to know the vast array of people that make the mission happen at a NOSC is incredibly rewarding. And I'm not just talking NOSC and staff and the unit personnel, but there's everything from local law enforcement, local politics, the Navy League, the Reserve Association with the mission, and any problem that comes your way. One of the roles you get to play as NOSCO is a resource connector to try to find ways that people who want to solve problems can be connected with people who are looking for solutions. Incredibly enjoyable and rewarding part of the job. Over.
Thanks, Joe. Appreciate it. And by now, the audience is probably thinking, wait a minute, this is too easy. So I like to mix it up. And the next question for Captain Bob. Ma'am, what type of issues did you take to the Echelon 4 vice handling it at the Ech 5 level? Over.
Okay, that wasn't fair. Okay, so what type of issues did I take to the Ech 4 vice handling at the NOS? The one thing I like about NOS Command, and once again, you are here because you're thinking, I want to be a NOSCO. I will tell you, your RCC commanders want you to do your job. They want you to do your job so much that they lay it out pretty much for you. Now, our RCC, we have a monthly call at the end of the month, and also we send in a monthly report. Now, you can call as much as you want, or you could call as less as you want. But I like the fact that we are allowed to run our command as a command because your leadership wants you to lead. And in doing that, you'll know the things that you can do and some of the things that are borderline and can't do. And why do I say borderline? Because even though you have unit COs and your unit commanding officers as a part of your NOS, you don't write their fit rep. You don't write their paper. And there may come some time where you may have an issue with a unit commanding officer. And if you have a issue with the unit commanding officer that you cannot resolve, those are some of the issues that you take higher. You take those higher because you will have a deputy, and you will have a deputy in between your unit commanding officers and yourself, that hopefully you'll be able to resolve that also with the unit commanding officers. But once again, they don't work for you, they work for their active command, and that is also where they get their evaluation. So sometimes in making decisions for your organization, they may not concur with you in totality, and there may be a rough spot there. If you can't get that, smooth out that conversation, I will tell you, those are very far and few in between. Very. I have 110 units, and I believe with maybe 2 or 3. But that's a small percentage for any NOSC. And once again, but once there are very few times you will have to really have to bring up some issues that will actually need upper echelon to get involved with, that they want and be the commanding officer that they absolutely want to be. Over to you, Commander Jeff.
Ma'am, thank you. And over to Jam to answer the same, or excuse me, Carrie, apologize. So Carrie, what type of issues did you take to the ESH4 Vice handle at the NOSC? Over.
That's a great question. My answer is because the NOSC staff was amazing, and because the RCC staff was truly incredible. The RCC Northwest commander and staff were absolutely amazing team to work for. My answer is none. But I called for advice, especially legal. Never hesitate to call legal. That really gets drilled into our heads. It doesn't show weakness. It shows the desire to have all of the information you need to make a decision. So I called legal often and was never, ever once told what to do, ever. It's like the captain said, the RCC wants you to do your job. They don't want to do it for you. So I called there to get the information I needed. Usually it was legal, maybe even advice from the RCC commander, who again, never once told me what to do. Just gave me the information I was looking for. And then it was over to me to solve the problem, or solve the problem in part, and then explain to them, how I got where I did, but it is what it is. So I'll say, and I was lucky, and again, it was a smaller NOSC. I never had to give them anything to handle, but I certainly called for advice and information to aid me in making decisions. Over.
Thank you, Carrie. And Commander Seals, same question. What type of issues did you keep at the NOSC Vice report to the echelon for? Over.
So I would say, kind of understanding the TED and TING relationship, right? The NOSC is the supported command, RCC is the supporting command, right? So initially you try and handle things within the NOSC that you can. I would say probably the number one thing that we don't spend too much time internally trying to solve are pay issues that are unresolvable at our level. Pay for your cell-res population is a huge priority to them. So it should be a huge priority to you. So if we cannot solve it within a couple of days, RCC wants to know within 5 days if we can't solve pay issues. So that's the type of thing where, I've got a small staff to serve 600 people, and we can't deep dive on every single pay issue. Otherwise, a lot of people will not get paid. So that's the type of thing that we absolutely kick up. The way my NOSC is structured is that I'm sectioned into departments, much the way RCC is, and I encourage them to reach out for things that hurt their heads. We get taskers, we attempt the taskers, any sort of head hurters where, you don't understand, you need clarification, RCC's there to help. And by all means, you don't have to go through your triad in order to reach out to your counterpart over there and ask. There are plenty of things that I will give them a heads up on and say, hey, this is happening, or this is what I'm doing. I'm an off installation NOSC. I am not in control of my own facility. And there are a lot of head hurters for me that come with that. And those are the types of things that I call and I say, hey, this is what's going on, just so you know, this may affect operations. The other thing, if I see a mobilization that is not going on schedule, if I'm not going to be able to get somebody out the door on time, or I'm having difficulties with an individual, that's the type of thing. Again, warfighting readiness is our number one priority, and making sure we meet that mission. So if I'm not going to be able to meet that mission for anything else that perhaps they can assist me with, that's also something that I will not hesitate to call RCC on.
Thank you, Jam Jam. Over to Commander Patterson with the same question. What type of issues did you take to the ESH4? Advice, keep to yourself. Over.
So yeah, I think my practice is very consistent with those that have already been briefed. RCC Southwest San Diego has a CCIR instruction for the things I have to tell them about. And there's, of course, that line in there, anything you think might spark their interest. So within the CO network, there's a good conversation that's just between the COs of, hey, do you think this would spark interest? My experience has been the summary heads up of, hey, boss, we're facing this issue. This is what we're doing about it. Kind of command by negation. Good Navy tradition there. And the one thing that's new within this job from previous jobs is the number of avenues that people have straight to the top, whether it's through ICE or other ways that our boss finds out about an issue, maybe before we've had the chance to brief him on it. So as issues percolate and we think that the boss might need to know about it, need to know the context, the full story, we'll send a timeline, we'll send a summary. But just like Jam Jam said, one of the expectations to the staff is we've got policy and resource kind of at a maximum of efficiency. So as soon as it gets hard, we got to escalate, because there's either a problem with we're not following the right policy, we don't have the right resources, or there's something wrong. And being a part of this kind of a dynamic, forward-leaning, very adaptive organization, there's a conversation at CNRFC, there's a conversation at CNR, RCC about these topics. We get visibility into them. You can go look at the Force DCS slides and see the different things that folks are trying to make better. So if we have an issue that pops on one of those focus items, like right now it's OSU optimization. So if we have an issue in OSU and we think that it's somehow derived from one of these symptoms that OSU optimization is trying to solve, that'd be something that I'd feed up. Hey, we're seeing this, no assistance required, but just for your information. So that's been successful, and the boss is not shy to say, okay, thanks, and that's it. And then we have a quarterly drumbeat with our RCC commander where he will just devote 30 minutes to what's on your mind. And that has been very helpful to kind of help shape my understanding of what he expects. That's not easy to capture in one of those instructions. That's it from here. Thanks.
All right, Joe, thank you. And I'll start a series of questions now to each panelist, specific to that panelist, so that they're not all answering the same question. So I'll direct this one to Jam Jam. And Jam Jam, you reported during COVID, right in the middle of the pandemic. So how did you maintain your medical readiness with the challenges of COVID and possibly not having a medical treatment facility nearby? Over.
So that's a great question. Where we are in NOSC Orlando, we are about an hour to the west of the closest MTF, which belongs to the Space Force. I always mess that up. It's now Space Force. And then we're about 2.5 hours away from Tampa. So we do have MOUs with both of those institutions for medical readiness when it comes to mobilization preparedness. As far as medical readiness internally, I've got 2 medical units, and I've got some great providers on the dental side and on the PHA side. And when they come to drill, we split up one of the units so that we've got coverage over both of our drill weekends. When they come, they're ready to work. And so, we hard scheduled people for appointments and we just start pushing them through. So if you're on the medical readiness DINK list, you are guaranteed to have an appointment at your next weekend to see a provider, to see a dentist, and we just kind of keep churning through. And that's pretty much the best way that we've found to keep our medical readiness afloat.
All right, thank you, Jam Jam. Next question is for Commander Chase. And Commander Chase, in your NOSC command, it was at Whidbey Island, which is a squadron-centric location. So my question to you is, as one of only a few NOSC in the force with operational squadrons and a squadron augment unit, a SAL, what additional responsibilities did that carry with it, being at Whidbey Island? Over.
Since Whidbey services 3 operational squadrons and then also has a SAL as one of our units, I have on the NOSC Whidbey AMD is a flight surgeon. So we have an active duty flight surgeon billet at the NOSC, and that flight surgeon's job is to be the flight surgeon for the operational squadrons, in addition to their CELRES flight surgeon, as well as the SAL, as well as the CELRES, as well as the NOSC staff. So some of the responsibilities that were unique because of the squadrons and the SAL were medical. So the increased medical responsibility for the NOSC staff that comes with coordinating with the squadrons. Some pay and flight pay, but supporting it will, and also lodging. Anybody with squadron knows NREL and lodging. So the NOSC is responsible for the squadrons, coordinating with the squadrons for their lodging program, and we at CNRFC pay their lodging as well. So those were the primary responsibilities, is the lodging and then the medical. The benefit is there were operational squadrons flying missions, deploying, and constantly going on debt. These are opportunities that not many NOSC sailors, especially depending on location, if they're not in a fleet concentration area, don't get to be a part of. So we would get NOSC sailors over to the squadrons. We had corpsmen going on debt with the squadrons, and I would coordinate that with the RCC, and they'd say, if you can let them go, that's on you. And of course it hurts. It always hurts to let somebody go. But the benefit to these sailors for getting to work on their E-Swiss, for getting to work on their, EAWS, to debt with the squadrons, to have that experience, the flight surgeon included. So, and to support that operational mission, VAQ 209 did a mobilization a couple of years ago, and the NOSC got to participate in that. They did a self-mob. So the opportunities that it presented to right there in close proximity support operational missions that you could just see and experience was fantastic. So those were some of the additional responsibilities that came with hosting, if you will, or having the squadrons quote unquote attached to NOSC Whidbey Island.
Carrie, thanks for the insight. Joe, this one's for you. What advice was given to you that helped you get started in command, and did it work? Over.
Well, it worked for me, but man, you get a lot of advice when you take command. I got advice from the Navy Reserve Augment Unit folks at that Augment Unit. You've got your flag mentor, the region deputy, the CSO is usually a recently served CO in your region. A lot of good advice out there. Some that was very effective for me was if you're not exhausted from repeating yourself, you're not communicating enough. So with the limited bandwidth we have to engage people, you have a job to communicate the strategic vision of the CNO through the CNR all the way down to the sailor that's there 2 days a month. So repeat yourself, and if you're not exhausted, try harder. An extension of that is reach out super early as soon as you know which NOSC you're going to set up that routine communication. And if you're not exhausted from talking to the person that you're relieving, you're not communicating enough. So that has helped me a lot, a submariner by trade, which is the silent service, to kind of break through that barrier, pick up the phone, make the call, establish the connection. Hand in hand with that, current region CEO says this all the time, and it's very important to us. build the relationship before you need it. There will be issues and crises you have to deal with. So if you know the people involved ahead of time, you can skip the first date awkwardness and get right to finding a solution that helps meet mission. Specific to turnover, something that just continues to give benefit, return on investment, is having a construct to discuss performance failure. Okay, so my first region CO had a very oversimplified construct that anytime you were talking about an issue, you had to boil it down to one of three categories. So if somebody doesn't get something done, medical readiness does not get improved, why? And you have to bin it into either can't, won't, or don't know how. So is this person's failure a result of can't? Like we didn't have the clinic open, so he could not get medically ready. Don't know how, this member hasn't gone through INDOC and doesn't know where medical is. So, it's a training piece. Or won't. So won't is obviously the willful folks that we need to counsel, DRB, whatever. Every won't pretends to be a can't or a don't know how. So you got to kind of cut through that. So having a framework, a very simplified framework that you can empower your unit triads, your chiefs, your first classes, anybody involved with the issuing of tasking, the monitoring of execution, and the feedback on performance. If they're binning it into can't, won't, don't know how, then it naturally progresses into kind of a constructive conversation on, well, what are we going to do about it? Do we need to get more resources? Do we need to provide better training? Or how are we going to counsel this person so that their won't is documented? There's kind of a fourth category that we're finding, especially in the teledrill environment, and it's the, well, I didn't think it was that important. I know how to do it. I have the resources to do it, but I've got 5 bosses and 400 things to do. So until you asked, I wasn't going to do it. Okay, so get it done. And then hand in hand with that is the document. So diagnose and document that piece of advice specific in turnover. If you have a culture around you that knows anytime something doesn't go right, we're going to figure out why. We're going to document it. If it's not paper, it's vapor. So get that documented won't into some form of retention device, memo to the record, counseling sheet, something. Those pieces of paper come in very handy in the very rare instances where you got to take somebody the distance on accountability efforts. So I would commend that to folks. Those pieces of advice work for me. As you're going around doing your pre-command and post-command, you visit your RCC and you speak to folks, you're going to get a lot of good advice. And I hope you get some good stuff that works for you and that you share it here. Thanks. Over.
Appreciate it, Joe and Captain Bob. I believe you have the largest NOSC in the force. So at a large NOSC like yours, morale can begin to dwindle when it seems that there's just not enough time to be a command. How do you balance the care of your sailors and the care of the cell res and manage morale? Over.
Thank you, Commander Jessup. I appreciate that. I honestly would tell you the question actually comes down to morale versus mission. I've never been a part of a command that I didn't need an additional staff or additional hours in the day to accomplish that 100% mission. The reality is that when it comes to prioritizing, you are deciding where to take risk. As a commanding officer, that is exactly what you always have to do, and that is take risk. What needs to be accomplished and where you can afford to take that risk. Sailors always need to feel like that they are a part of a team and part of that and part of a Navy, because as a NOSC, sometimes you kind of don't get that feeling that you're part of the big Navy. Yes, you are part of the big Navy. You're a big part of what the Navy has been charged to do as its mission, that NOSC family. You have to learn how to work harder together and strive to be innovative, and then your sailors will actually do more, and they'll give you more, and they'll stop doing that check in the box thing. So by prioritizing the command, the team building functions, you're going to love the team building functions. You're really assuring the greatest productivity and buy-in from your sailors, which brings you closer to your mission accomplishment. Now, there are going to be times where you're challenged by your sailors. Who means more to you, ma'am or sir? Your cell res or us? I will tell you at any point in time, there's never division. There is no us versus them. There is just the big us. They are a part of us. They can't do their job without us, and we can't do our job, or we don't exist without them. Morale is actually brought to the plate when you basically say, this is why we are here. Here is our accountability. This is your responsibility. And don't forget that you can also have fun in doing your job. That's all I have.
Ma'am, thank you very much for that. Well, we've already gone quite a bit here in the hour session. So at this time, I would like to open the floor for questions from the audience. So once again, in order for me to call on you to ask your question, please raise your hand. You can use the raised hand icon in the MS Teams window. For those of you that can see that, it's usually next to the little chat bubble. There's an emoji section, and you can select a hand raise, and I'll call on you. Please address your question to a specific panelist. If you don't, then I will just call on one of the panelists to answer your question. So if you have a preferred panelist that you'd like to direct your question to, please make sure that you're communicating that when you ask your question. All right, so the floor is open for questions from the audience, and I will keep an eye out on the chat for questions as well. Over. Okay, it looks like we're getting a question from Lieutenant Commander Lane Cameron. So Lane, the floor is yours. And please remember to direct the question to someone on the panel. Over.
Thank you, sir. I'd like to direct my questions toward Commander Patterson, with whom I've had the pleasure of collaborating on other issues and some of his data insights. Do you know if there's a good checklist, or so to speak, a comprehensive document that kind of contains all these different data fields and data sets we should be trying to look into to check our readiness, and also other check sheets for kind of taking over a NOSC? So I'll have the pleasure of relieving Commander Jessup and filling some big shoes here next year over NOSC Schenectady. So what checklist should I come with so that we're ready to kind of do a solid turnover, though I'm sure he'll handle it with grace as always. Over.
It's so dynamic, and that's definitely the approach I took the first time I took command in Milwaukee. It didn't work very well, to tell you the truth, just because there's so many things that change. Even the command assessment checklist that we went over for the most recent assessment, those policies had changed between the assessment and my turnover, and we were running the program solely different. So I'm sitting there trying to understand, why are we doing it this way? And the policy still said to do it that way, but the practice had already evolved. So it's very, very fast. So those create great frameworks. The most recent command assessment feedback, whether for your NOSC or the NOSC in the region that has completed it most recently. The DOCS is huge, reading every comment, trying to understand it. Between those two documents, you can get a real good feel for what you are commanding. And then understanding how people do their job, who has a tickler, who has a checklist already that they are using, and learning how they do it. One thing I hope you find is ways that you can synchronize the staff that is doing similar work. For example, our training department pulls the PMKEE report to help people get their advancement stuff done. Well, our ESO was also pulling it, and our YN1, who handles fit reps, was also pulling it. So, as you do your turnover and you find out what they're doing, you can synchronize things and make things a little bit better. But in terms of a holistic view, sorry, I don't have one. And constantly putting one together, I maintain a OneNote notebook where I just drop everything that comes my way, and that is going to be the turnover notebook for my relief someday. And I'd be happy to send that to you prior to getting out there to Schenectady. Over.
Thank you. That was very insightful. Back over to you, Commander Jessup.
All right, thanks, Lane. Next question is coming from Lieutenant Commander Jim Dells. Over, Jim.
All right. Well, thank you very much, sir. I'm going to direct this to Captain Bob. But really, if anybody has any insight, any of the panelists, please let me hear them. So 2 years ago, it was unthinkable or unimaginable that we'd be working in a remote environment, especially across the reserves. And obviously, I'm not in command, but I've talked to some of my friends who are in command now, and there were some challenges with that. And who knows what the next year is going to look like if the new normal extends this sort of virtual reality that we have going on. So I just kind of wanted to hear from your perspective, any trends that you might see happening. What maybe even give a prediction of what you think the future looks like. Are we ever going to get back to having 100% of our, NOSC reserve units in the building, or some sort of hybrid model, or anything you can think of that goes along those lines? Thanks. Over.
All right, thank you, Lieutenant Commander Bell. Lieutenant Commander Dales. Okay, well, thank you so very much. I do appreciate the question. When I think of the question, I think of the 100%. What is actually 100%? The new NOSC, or the new normal. When I look at the new normal, it is whatever we need to do to, and I know this almost sounds like a cookie cut thing, but to accomplish the mission. Many people who I've ran into in the past hate the word policy or policy compliance. Why? Because that means that we got to deviate from the norm. We love norm. But when we deviate, we have to look for sound judgment, common sense requirements. What should we be notified, and who are we actually notifying? If this policy that we're going to be creating, is it going to inhibit our ability to accomplish the greater mission? In all actuality, it is all built upon the safety of what we still have to do in order to accomplish the mission. And then we got to ask ourselves, where will we take action to change that policy? What is it going to result in the end? What are we actually looking for when we look through the opposite end? What is the result of what we're actually putting in, assuming what we're going to get out of it? I believe that we will never get to back where we used to be, because where we used to be is somewhere where we believe that, in other words, my dad is a preacher, and he used to always say, and he would quote scriptures, and he would say, in all things give thanks, but not for all things. Now, in all giving thanks, meaning that at once upon a time, we were not as virtual as we are today. And because of COVID, we have grown in many ways that the Navy, the DOD, the DON did not know that they could absolutely grow. And because of these things, we've been able to do things virtually. We've been able to get more positive responses and effective good work out of some of our CELRES who were not able to even travel to some places and be in the same place at one time and still be able to support their active command. So do we want to be where we came from? The answer is no. What we want to do is see what it is that we need to achieve and see, can we build on where we currently are and evolve further. But evolve into what? What are we actually doing? What are we going to be accountable for? I think we embrace our background and our history, and we look across our force to see where we are going to be in the future, and we look toward that. So not backwards, but looking forward and embracing all of our changes and looking at what we had to create a better opportunity for you, to where Commander Patterson even communicated after being given some notes from one individual going into his NOSC, things are going to be different. Things are going to change. So even from what I'm telling you today, tomorrow things are going to change. So my thing is look toward evolution. It is an expectation. It is the mission. It is the strategy. It's going to be the commitment to pursuit at any level. So just stay in the communication and understand what is important in the next day. That's all I have, Commander Justice.
Thank you, ma'am. Let's see. So I don't see any hands raised right now, so I'll direct the question to Jam Jam. And Jam Jam, what made you choose NOSC Orlando for your command tour? Over.
So one of the major things that I kind of already touched upon was the opportunity to work with a full triad. So to have a senior enlisted leader as well as an XO in order to make decisions. It's the community I came from in aviation, and it's absolutely the community that the structure I wanted to have in command. Another thing that drew me to NOSC Orlando was the population size. So based on the population size, you kind of know how many units you have. And that kind of gives you an idea of the challenges that you may face, especially with the warfighting readiness and making sure that all 600 of my folks are ready to go when called. And then of course I'm in Florida, and so there's no winter. So I guess that's also kind of a big thing.
Thanks, thanks, Jam Jam. And Commander Chase, what is the relationship like, or when you were in command? What was your relationship like with the Wargym, the CellRes Wargym? How did you incorporate them into your whole command philosophy? Over.
There we go. That's tricky. The wardroom aspect is tricky, and maybe some other NOSCOs will have a different answer, but whatever your experience has been with a wardroom in the fleet, it is likely to be different at a NOSC because like Jam Jam mentioned, there are NOSCs where you as a CO are the only officer, maybe for miles, and that's quite an adjustment. So there isn't a wardroom any longer. So you think, well, I'm going to build a wardroom with the CellRes, but in reality, you see them once a month. So how do you do that? So the challenge is on you as the commanding officer of the NOSC to create it and express to that reserve leadership that you're interested in having a wardroom environment relationship. I was even able to pull them away during lunch on drill weekend. We'd go to the galley and eat together just to have that on-base experience, but communicate to them what you have going on at the NOSC so that they know, so that they can communicate that information to their CellRes. Because absent any information about what the NOSC staff is doing in between drill weekends, they might assume the best, they might assume the worst, they might say nobody cares about my pay issue, when in reality, I mean, of course we do, we care about it every day. So to communicate with them, take the opportunity to say, hey, this is something I'm doing. Just wanted to let you guys know, or what are your thoughts on this? Or here's an issue that we're facing, or what input do you all have from your interactions with my staff that I'd like to hear? And can I give you guys some inputs, and just make sure that the things that are important to me are also important to you, because I'm not your boss. So we really have to see eye to eye on what to focus on drill weekends, because at the end of the day, again, I'm not your boss. So if you decide your priorities are something different than going to medical, or something different than completing your pre-mobilization efforts, or something different than what your active command wants, then that's a struggle. So you have to work in most cases to develop any kind of wardroom, and the dynamic is very different than what you're used to. And developing that cohesion can be a challenge, but equally as rewarding. So the answer to your question is you really have to drive it. Hopefully they respond well like mine did, and it's enjoyable. But it's just very different than anything in the fleet, because it doesn't automatically exist. You have to work for it.
Thank you, Kerry. And just realized I did not open any questions to the phone line. So if there's anyone on the phone or dialed in that has a question for the panel, please come off mute. That's *6, I believe, to turn the mute off. And I'll open the floor to the phone lines here for the next 20 seconds if there's a question. Over. Okay, so nothing heard from the phone line. So there's a comment in the chat from a Mr. James Gregory, and he states, this is directed to Commander Patterson, and he states if we could stress the importance of PCOs contacting their RCC N4 department prior to taking command. Oh, one sec, I'm gonna mute everyone, just so we don't have feedback. Okay, and the comment again from Mr. Gregory is that to stress to PCOs that they may potentially be the only officer at the NOSC and be designated as the AO, so they should contact their RCC N4s to get all the training requirements completed prior to reporting to command so that they can be the designated AO. So I believe he's just pointing that out. If you're a PCO and you're on the call, yes, it's definitely good to get ahead on that because otherwise there's significant training that has to be done prior to actually being designated as the command AO. Does anyone on the panel have anything further to add to that comment? Jam or Joe?
I think Mr. Gregory's point is that it's a small Navy, and if you are one of the PCOs that struggled to get through all of those courses and get certified, that you will be reminded. So good to hear from you again, Mr. Gregory. That is a huge point. I keep all the notes from you got to take all these courses to get certified, all these things, and then you got to recertify every year, every 2 years. If you've got a good note-taking, note-keeping process so that you can keep these programs alive, because any one of these programs, if you can't order medical supplies, now your medical readiness is hurt. You can't order your analysis supplies, now you're not, you become such an integral part of a system of systems that you got to keep it floating. So yeah, the earlier you start on that stuff, the better. I agree completely. Over.
Thank you, Joe. And I see the 5-minute warning here for our presentation, so our panel. So I'd like to take one more question, and I see Lieutenant Commander D'Angelo has his hand raised. So Lieutenant Commander D'Angelo, Michael, over to you, and please direct it to a panelist. Over.
Well, yes, sir. Thanks for the opportunity. I was a NOSC CO about 10 years ago, small NOSC, and one of the things that were, I came straight from Afghanistan to my command, and when I got there, staff was, small, very junior. My chief had to teach one of our sailors how to drive. We had to vouch with local landlords to get rental apartments. We had to share with the Marines a lot of things. The only other officer, like was mentioned by previous panelists, was the Marine officer. So there were a lot of things that you don't expect coming from, big Navy. And, being a prior senior chief, I was a little more senior in age, but I was a brand new lieutenant. So there was, also a lot of the interaction with senior officers, captains in the VTU and in some of the units. So these are the kind of things I was just kind of, since most of the panelists are at big NOSCs, for people out in the audience who are interested in taking a small NOSC or becoming a CO, and that may be your first assignment, to kind of, as panelists have mentioned, get in touch with the person you're relieving and find out all the minutia and the intricacies of your command that makes it different. We had the congressional office, all kinds of things contacting us. So that's all I wanted to say, sir, and turn it back.
All right, thank you very much for that insight. And we're in the final moments now of this panel discussion. I would really like to thank the panelists once again. Thank you all for volunteering your time. I know we're kind of, different coasts here, so we had to schedule it later in the day. I'd like to say a comment on the Navy Reserve Mentorship Network. Once again, there's the link at the very top of this slide. There you'll find this presentation recorded. So if you have personnel who may have been interested, but there were other meetings that bumped up against this particular one, please share that link with them, and I'll have it uploaded this afternoon to the portal. That way, if there are any lessons picked up from this panel, you can pass on to those future CEOs. Also, a lot of these events, you'll see monthly Force Connects that come out. they're typically directed towards the weekends, towards the drill weekends, for the benefit of the cell res. So this is one of those rare opportunities where, you know, it's kind of catered towards the FTS community. So once again, I appreciate those of you that dialed in and took advantage of this to engage with our panelists. I hope you were impressed as much as I was. I certainly have notes to take, even though I'm still in my command tour. Lots of really good advice. Joe, certainly I'd be interested in seeing that notebook that you talked about with Lane. Appreciate you volunteering that. But once again, thank you for joining us today. On behalf of the Navy Reserve Mentoring Network, thanks again. So out from Schenectady.